Hello, BookTube. I have a nice little Brattle Bookshop book haul to share with you today. And it's a nicer Brattle Bookshop haul than the average one because it was financed by one of you, for which I cannot express my thanks enough. I walked in today and was presented with a gift card, which I immediately spent. And I thought I'd show you uh, what I got with it. Starting with this, I think it's a book that I've mentioned on this channel before. It's A.S. Byatt's Passions of the Mind. I already have it, but I don't have it in hardcover, and the paperback that I have is not very sturdy. And I reread it all the time, so I want a hardcover. I was very happy to find it. It's all of her, or not all, but her selection of uh, paid critical essays, deadline prose on the writing life, on various artists and writers. Her two essays in here on George Eliot are just amazingly good, and this collection also includes her long and quite delightful essay on Georgette Heyer, on the romance, the historical romance novels of Georgette Heyer. So I was very happy to find this, and I will simply uh, pluck out the paperback version that I have of it and get rid of it and replace it with the hardcover. Then next, because it was a gift certificate, and because when you have a gift certificate you splurge on yourself, I got something that's a little strange as a pick, because I'm pretty sure that my mind is made up about it, but I'm going to give it another try. And it's this. It's Dune, House Atreides by Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson. This is from, I think, the year 2000. It's all going on 20 years old. It's a prequel to Frank Herbert's Dune, to the great science fiction novel by Brian Herbert's father. And I read it at the time and hated it, and have hated every single of the innumerable books that have come out since, because the names are all the same, the concepts are all the same, but the writing is just nowhere near as good. And I have the same problem with Jeff Shara writing historical fiction, including American Civil War historical fiction, in the footsteps of his father, but without his father's writing skill. Uh, I read this when it first came out, and I thought it was plodding, which cannot be said about a single thing that Frank Herbert ever wrote. But I know that the sequels have a lot of fans, and they've gone on for a long time. This is the very first one, so I'm going to give this another try. I found it in a nice big trade paperback, so I'm gonna give it another try. And then the next one, actually, it's an indulgence as well, but all this is, and it's a book I really really love, and it's a bit of a tough sell on BookTube. But I actually, the reason I got it, aside from the fact that it was $1, is that there's a reason behind it, and I'm going to be getting to the reason behind it in I think my next video. I'm going to make a video in which I unveil all. But it's this huge chunker, The Queen Mother. By William Shawcross, and we've seen it before. We saw it on the big biography bookshelf tour. It's a second copy. I've reinforced it with tape, and it's a copy that I can beat the hell out of, and you like that sometimes. I sometimes prefer them to the copies that I can't. And then there's this little thing from Dover Classics, Sir Harry Hotspur of Humblethwaite. This is by Anthony Trollope. It's a thin little novel, and Dover reprinted it, and I think they reprinted it straight from the original type pages, and it's, well, you all know I love Anthony Trollope anyway, and he was in the middle of writing huge, ambitious political novels in a long series when he, in the 1860s, decided to stop for a bit and write a quick, gem-intense little novel that doesn't deal with a sprawling cast of characters. It just deals with a very close core of characters. There's the main character, the title character, Sir Harry, who's a very wealthy Cumberland aristocrat or landowner, and a great commoner, as the phrase goes. He's immensely wealthy. He's immensely respected. He has a great noblesse oblige type attitude towards life. Is very good to his tenants, is very good to his constituents, and all that sort of thing. And he has one heir, his daughter, who is, heir to everything, as wealthy as a princess, and treated as such by everyone around her. And although her hand is being sought far and wide because of her own charms and because of the immense wealth of her father, she herself is in love with the wrong guy. a a thorough wastrel that she thinks is great, and everyone else sees him for what he is, including her father. And I have only read this book once. All the Trollope that I have read and reread in my life, I have only read this book once. So I'm going to reread it, especially since, if I remember correctly, Trollope ranked it very highly. He actually considered it one of his most successful books, and you'll never hear it mentioned, and you'll never see it reprinted. Certainly Penguin will never do it. Oxford did when they were doing a centenary celebration of Trollope with all those yellow spine paperbacks. But other than that, Penguin, I think, did it for those orange spine numbered, hideous Trollope paperback editions that they did. But you'll never see, no one's ever going to reprint this now. And Dover certainly isn't going to do it. So I found this. I snatched it right up. Then, speaking of Penguin, for Project Penguin, I got this. American Local Color, 1880 to 1920. These are place writing, travel writing, local color. They're paid occasional writing from a wide variety of authors about various locales in America. That cover is by a very underrated American painter. That is the beach at Agunquit, Maine, which I have very fond memories of Agunquit, Maine. But anyway, there are people in here that you will know. Well, let's see here. We've got Kate Chopin. You've got Sarah Orjuna, of course. You've got Joel Chandler Harris, the Uncle Remus author. But you also have people like Ham Garland and a bunch of other writers who never rose above regional status. So that you have two different kinds of Penguin classics, right? You have the Penguin classics that attractively reprint books that you already know. Portrait of a Lady by Henry James in the Penguin Classic. And then you have the other kind of Penguin Classic, like just recently the Book of Witches, or that book on ancient Egyptian writing, where the editors at Penguin Classics, on the financial cushion of the higher profile, better known reprints, will have the freedom to make an anthology that is interesting and sometimes groundbreaking. And this has all the I never saw it when it first came out, so it has all the markings of that for me. It'd be immensely interesting to read. Plus, I am a big fan of that kind of writing even now. You can find it now in the half dozen glossy travel magazines that are at your local newsstand. Those magazines tend to pay very well, and that is what they buy. That they buy pieces like that. They don't call it that anymore. And then the next one, something I've had before many times, but I've got rid of it every single time. It's Book Business by Jason Epstein. A million-year-old book brontosaurus who was an editor in his life. As an editor at Doubleday and Random House, he was the editor, the late-night confidant, the ATM machine of a good, strong dozen of your favorite authors. He shaped into being and encouraged into print some of the greatest literary lions of the 20th century. He shaped the 20th century in a way that is given to very few people to do. And when there was a strike in New York a long time ago, he and his wonderful wife, Barbara, created the New York Review of Books. And it's still going strong. And this is his... He was urged by many, many people over the course of many, many years in all sorts of locations, from book conventions to phone calls to browsing carts at the Brattle. He was urged by all and sundry to write a memoir about the book business. And he finally did. I read it before it came out. I read it when it came out. I read it when it came out in paperback. And then a long time lapsed. So this will be the first time I've read it in quite some time. My early impressions of it were that it should have been more, that there should have been more to it, a lot more meat, and that the reason there wasn't is the same reason that it was the one problem that I had with Bob Gottlieb's Avid Reader, which just came out. The one problem that I had with it is these publishers and agents and editors who, some of their targets are still alive, or the children who were named after them are still alive, or the grandchildren are. So we're not getting the unvarnished story, the whole story. If Jason Epstein, I mean, you don't know who he is, but if Jason Epstein can wait until he's almost 80 and then write a book called Book Business, and it can be that thin, then Jason Epstein is leaving out a lot more than he's putting in. And I understand the tact of that, and I understand the friendship of that, but that's no good service to your posterity when you are in such a position to write such a book. I'm hoping that there's more, and that we'll see more. But in the meantime, this is a heck of a book. And there's one point, I forget exactly where it is. I didn't find the page. I haven't reread this yet, so I didn't find the page for this video. But there's one point, about 2/3 of the way through the book, when he says, I have a strong feeling that the book business is poised to change into something unrecognizable from anything I have known. That's largely true, and that has largely happened. When he was writing this book, the book business, the retail book business, was just on the verge of changing from what it was, which was a money-losing operation very much concerned with literature and with finding and nurturing people. Yes, there were always the two guys in the front of the office with the clean desks who were in charge of the latest crossword puzzle, or who were looking around for the latest thing that everybody on the 518 train to Scarsdale would want to buy and read. The stuff that would float the budget of the house. Yes, there were always those two guys, but the main group of people would talk on the phone with an author for hours on end, would float the author, here's $200 for the rent, keep working, that sort of thing. That's not done anymore, and in anything like the scale or widespreadness that it was once done. And that atmosphere, the 3 martini lunch, the helping an author through the dark night of the soul by actually going to his house and almost literally holding his hand through a bad chapter, that atmosphere produced some of the great works of 20th century American fiction. And that atmosphere is no more. And I worry that it's done serious damage. The lack of it has done serious damage. Or not damage, of course. American letters, American fiction is in fine shape. But someday, someone is going to write a history, a real, gigantic history of reading and reading tastes and editing and editorial habits from the post-war America to the end of American democracy, to 2016. Somebody's going to write a history of that 80 years in which they describe in exacting detail what changed and how it changed. And I think you could probably see that change in the fiction. The novels that have come out in the last, since this book came out, I think in 2000 or 1999 or something like that. So that's 20 years. Let's say 20 years. The novels that have come out in the last 20 years have been airbrushed, polished workshop products. They've been sounded and pounded and sanded down in a number of different financial meetings with money people, in addition to editorial meetings. They don't have rough edges. And I think there might be an argument to be made that they also don't have rough genius. And I'd be interested in someone writing about that. And Jason Epstein is in a perfect position to do that if he would maybe write it and put it in a box and say, when you're gone, it can be published or something like that. But my point is, there's a vast difference in tone and texture between Norman Mailer's The Naked and the Dead and Garth Risk-Hallberg's City on Fire. Now, I'm not saying that the difference is genius. The sheer insight and talent involved in those two books is roughly the same. It's both astronomical. It's off the charts in both cases. But if you've read both books, I don't know, they're both 1,000 pages long, and one is ancient and one is new, so you might not have. But if you read both those books, or if you read, what's another example? Let's say Giles Goat Boy. by John Barth. Or no, let's not pick an author that I really love. Let's pick somebody that I'm kind of sort of neutral to. The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz. If you pick that novel, and you weigh that against, for instance, Wits, in some ways the same novel, and yet Wits is infinitely more, I almost want to say crowdsourced. It is infinitely smoother, and it doesn't stick with you as much. And I wonder about that, and I wonder if that is a byproduct. How could it not be a byproduct of how the industry itself, responsible for getting these books into existence, has changed? Anyway, that's a huge digression on Jason Epstein, just to say, I guess by way of saying, if you're interested in the American book industry, and especially how it's changed over the last 40 years, you really should read this book. There's a handful of others that you should read as well. It's a pet interest of mine, I admit. So hence the huge digression. Let's go on. We're almost done. Actually, you almost got out free and clear without a Grandpa Simpson rant. There's only one more book, and it's this one, and it illustrates something I mentioned about the Brattle before, that sometimes the Brattle can present you with a second chance, a chance to redo a mistake. Like, for instance, Dune, House Atreides was not a mistake. I read it carefully. I wanted to like it. I wanted it to be good, and I hated it. And then I read it again when it came out in mass market, and I hated it again. So it's not a second chance. This is me saying, well, I didn't make a mistake the first time. I'm just going to read it again and see if maybe, I don't know, I've grown more generous, or it was doing things that maybe I missed after all this time. But the other kind of second chance is when I get a book from a publisher. I read it, I write about it, and then I get rid of it. Because, the mind frame that I have whenever a culling period comes over me is, you can't keep everything that you get. Look at all the books that you get. You can't possibly keep them all. Even if you like them, you can't keep them. So get rid of it. And that usually works. Usually I'm okay with that. But every once in a while, a book will stick in my mind. I will get rid of it. A month will pass, 2 months will pass, and then I will keep thinking, I wish I hadn't got rid of that. And this is one of the last book today is one of them, The Ivory Vikings. This is by Nancy Marie Brown, and it's about the Lewis Viking set. You will recognize them from Harry Potter, the most famous chess set in the world. These ivory and bone chess pieces that were uncovered in 1830s Scotland, so a long time ago, the most famous chess set in the world. And this is a definitive history of them, and a groundbreaking history of the guild and the woman who was in charge of the industry that almost certainly brought them into existence. The author does a wonderful job of digging into the background of these iconic figures. And I read the book, you all know from watching this channel, I have a sweet tooth for all things Viking, and this was really good, a really good non-typical Viking book. And I read it, and I reviewed it, and I loved it, and I got rid of it. And here it is again. This is almost certainly my copy. I mean, where else? This is almost certainly the copy that I gave or traded to the Brattle back then. This is, I think, 2015 or... 2015. So now I have it back. So hoping that I keep it this time. And there you go. That was a Brattle book haul, born out of generosity, born out of BookTube generosity, for which the person who called in that gift card, thank you so much. You made my afternoon. And I'll see you soon, BookTube. Thank you.